Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl. Welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. Today's guest is Dr. Kate Lucre, who's a psychotherapist, group specialist, climber, and an ex-acting kid. She's also the author of a new book, Compassion Focused Group Psychotherapy. And her work really matters because it supports people who really are at the edge of therapeutic opportunity, those often labelled too difficult or untreatable. Kate's work really brings compassion to people with complex trauma and deep relational wounds. She's taken a unique path in terms of shaping her therapy style: drama, acting, rock climbing. In fact, climbing is really a metaphor for the therapy journey, but also playfulness and performance are woven into her groups. And at the heart of her approach are symbols, objects, embodied experiential exercises. Think compassionate kit bag or Bruce the elephant. She'll be talking about all of those things in our conversation. But she's developed a 5-phase group model from waiting list to moving on, and she'll talk us through each of those 5 phases. And you'll notice a real spirit of rebellious creativity and deep compassion. What roles do we play? What's in our kit bag? And what mountain are we climbing? Kate's journey shows that therapy is not a summit, but a lifelong climb. So let's dive in. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. And so I bring you Dr. Kate Lucre. All right. Well, Dr. Kate Lucre, welcome back to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Is this like the when the bands that have been together for like centuries and then they get back together for the victory tour? Is this us?
Yes, that's something like that. It's a very
Ancient bikers rerun.
Yes, you're part of an small esteemed group of people who have been able to be on this show more than once. Our last one was on the 23rd of February 2024. So now I wanted to let you know that that particular episode is the 11th most watched episode of the lifetime of the channel.
Ooh. So that's like you're just stirring up that little competing rank mentality in me. I can feel the fire beginning to. I wonder who's 10 and 9.
Yes, I thought 11th might really sort of tickle your fancy. And but for the last month you were the second, so there you go. But good. I mean, you've got this new book, Compassion Focused Group Therapy, an exploratory program for people who could have a diagnosis of personality disorder. What I wanted to actually ask you was tell us about the name of the book, the whole name, and how you came to sort of deciding what to actually call it.
So it was a little bit of a tussle with the publishers, who I have to say, Pavilion Publishing have been incredible. They've basically let me do what I wanted to do. They've been very hands off. Which is someone who's slightly controlling, was really helpful. But there was a little bit of a tussle because it's a long title. And of course, for a book, well, it's a very long title. But I think for me, obviously the compassion focused, that sits at the heart of everything that I have been doing for at least the last 20, maybe getting on 25 years. But the group psychotherapy, rather than compassion focused therapy for groups, which is sometimes how this is described, for me, the distinction is really important because it's the length of time and it's the depth of work. So I see, and this is very arbitrary, Stan, because I think it's mixed, but I see the shorter group programs, maybe kind of 12 sessions or so. This is compassionate mind training, particularly for people who have significant ruptures, like we talked about last time, and tragedy and trauma in their early life experience. That these shorter programs, we're just getting started, creating safeness, compassionate mind training, psychoeducation. That's that bit. And then I would think about kind of CFT groups that might be that middle bit where you're expanding the compassionate mind training and the psychoeducative process into more process. So I support people to run programs that all through these stages from 6 sessions through to 60 plus. And that bit in the middle, we might get into a little bit of chair work, a little bit of multiple selves. We might get people role taking their inner critic. So we're moving into action. We're getting out of our chairs, what I would think of as putting compassion to work, but we're not depth diving. Now, of course, the transference, counter-transferential material, the projective processes, the anti-group, that will show up, no doubt. But how much you can depth dive into that will be limited by capacity and time. So for me, compassion focused group psychotherapy is the whole piece, is those first 2 pieces plus process driven, slow paced, exploratory psychotherapy, which sometimes involves psychodrama, reworking, transforming early traumatic memories. Sometimes it involves working through what's happening in the room. It's more discursive, it's more sedentary, but it's long-term process work. It's kind of Yelomium, I suppose, if there is such a thing. Much more attending to kind of what's in the room, what's happening, and actually exploring that, using the compassionate mind training to help people to begin to turn back to their early tragedy and rework, reshape early attachment relationships. That's the kind of So for me, the title is really important.
Oh, I'm glad I asked, because that distinction, those 3 sort of versions of CMT, CFT group, and compassion focused group psychotherapy, that makes a lot of sense. Would you say that for the work that you do, people need a kind of a group psychotherapy background themselves, to be able to do the depth diving that you're describing there?
Yes, but that doesn't mean that people always do, and I supervise people who have and who haven't. I think one of the key things, and I know I'm sure I spoke about this previously, I think the most important thing that we need as psychotherapists engaging in this longer term exploratory work is our own therapy. I wouldn't recommend doing this kind of long-term exploratory group psychotherapy, offering this to patients, if you haven't had your own personal therapy, because stuff shows up. I mean, of course, it shows up everywhere. But I think one of the things that you were asking me to think about before we met today was about I'm very happy to talk about my own vulnerabilities, the stuff I get wrong. I'm okay with that. But that's amplified in a group. If something goes south in a group, you've got a whole, between 8 and 10 pairs of eyes watching you. And if you haven't worked through what that pulls up in you, then it can be pretty catastrophic, I think. I've seen people in group psychotherapy programs becoming unwell because actually things get pulled on them. New facilitators join a group can be on the receiving end of some pretty vicious projective processes, on the receiving end of some pretty unpleasant transferential material. If you've not had your own personal therapy, that can really activate. I've certainly found that myself.
Therapy for the facilitator. I guess the role of supervision is so important as well, perhaps even co-facilitators and things like that. I know that a lot of the time early on, you were quite solo as a facilitator too. But all of those things really help to support the facilitator, to help support the psychotherapy happening amongst the group. I really did find it sort of profound for me when we talked last time about attachment and relational trauma and tragedy. I felt that was a really useful way to think about the work. And I guess I was curious about the part of the title that comes after the colon as well, an exploratory program for people who could have a diagnosis of personality disorder, in inverted commas. What was you thinking about the wording for the title in that section as well?
Well, again, this is another part of this that's really important to me, is that I mean, there's lots of different levels to this. You asked me about a little about thinking about my own personal journey. I think there's another version of my story where actually I didn't discover drama, climbing. And actually, I think I could have ended up as someone who would have been diagnosed with a personality disorder. I was a really troubled young person. I had a really difficult, traumatic early life. And I think there's another version of me that didn't find those things that grounded me, didn't have the people around, didn't have those kind of other people. And so the whole thing about personality disorder feels very personal, because I can see particular points where my life could have gone in different directions. And so I guess working with this group of people, that's part of my passion for this work. But also, I suppose the reason why I put this in the title is because I absolutely do not subscribe to the concept of personality disorder. I think it's pejorative and unhelpful, and actually it's just plain wrong. And I could go on and on about this, and I won't. I bang on it a little bit in the book, and I have talked about it in all sorts of different settings. People who engage in these kind of behaviours, they're not disordered. It's really functional and adaptive in the context of early attachment and relational trauma and tragedy. But if I put edge of therapeutic opportunity, attachment and relational trauma, then many people wouldn't know what I was talking about. So the rationale for using could attract a diagnosis of personality disorder was making sure that when people see the book or search for books on treatment, if you do a search, I think on Amazon for treating personality disorder, this book will come up. And I want this book to be a book that people who are looking to work compassionately with people who would attract that diagnosis, I want them to see it. I want them to have access. I don't know if that makes sense. I think I'm kind of rambling a bit, but
no, it makes perfect sense.
But it means that it's very wordy, because I didn't want this to be exploratory program for people with personality disorder, because then there is an assumption that I subscribe to that, and I absolutely don't. So
and this is why I sort of was really just curious to see the title, that because I suspected that this was what was behind it in a sense, and it is phrased in a way that both kind of leverages off a sort of a system that is just out there, but also gives a nod to the fact that you don't really agree with that terminology or that kind of way of conceptualizing things, and of course then you go on to elaborate on that in the book itself. Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned there the climbing and theatre or drama and how that kind of is all sort of took you a little bit, or became integrated in a sense, at least symbolically or conceptually, as you moved into CFT and group therapy. What is it about climbing in particular that really so closely mirrors the journey that people might be on in psychotherapy for both therapist and client, I suppose, too?
when you sent that through, I was doing my yoga practice this morning, and it was rolling around in my mind, because I think for me, climbing it's wrapped around the fibre of my being. There's no doubt about it for me, and I guess it sounds I almost feel like it's not. I feel a little cheesy saying it, but it completely changed the course and the path of my life. My first discovered climbing when I was 18, and other than when I've been really heavily pregnant, there hasn't been a time in my life since then when climbing hasn't been as much a part of me as anything else. So, and it took me a while to realize where they overlapped, because climbing came way first. Psychotherapy was way down the track. It wasn't till I was in I wasn't a kid going, I really want to be a therapist. I was a kid who was, I'm going to be an actress. I'm going to be on the stage. I'm going to be in films. I'm going to travel the world. Up until, I think I've said in the book, up until I realized, one, that I wasn't good enough, to just do it. And, it was pretty crushing because I was like, I'm a natural show off. So actually it was a bit crushing to realize that I'd have to have another job and those other jobs looked a bit rubbish. So that's when I kind of reshaped things. But with climbing, there's a little WhatsApp group that you and I are both part of that we were bouncing around some ideas about this recently. I posted a little video of myself and my climbing partner, probably about, I don't know how far up we were, but 150 meters up, up a little, well, it's not a mountain, but it's a big lump of rock that sticks out the sea in Spain. And I was noticing that in that moment, there was an overlap of threat and drive and soothing. And I was asking the illustrious Dr. James Kirby to explain that, and he couldn't. And we were talking about riding motorbikes being a similar thing. So there was something about it comes together, because it is scary because you're hanging off a cliff. It is really exciting, and it is achievement that you're going up, and it's my hands and my feet and my body that gets me up this cliff. And it also gives me the most incredible sense of calm and peace, and just the birds and the sound of my own body and the nature around me. It's all three, and they come together. And it wasn't until I started kind of musing on that I began to think about the other parallels with psychotherapy. And I suppose one of the things that popped straight into my head is it's really hard.
Yes.
And actually, group psychotherapy is also really hard. One of my patients, one of my group members years ago, gave me a spider skin. I always use it in my workshops, not the actual skin, a picture of it, I can see your face. It's a rose tarantula. And he likened the experience of the psychotherapeutic group program as being like a spider shedding their skin. Was that when a spider sheds their skin, they shed everything, and they're completely raw and exposed and vulnerable, and they have to kind of wait for the new skin to grow. And this is similar to therapy, is that you reach a point where the old stuff doesn't work, but there isn't a seamless maneuver from the old to the new. There's a time when the old stuff doesn't work, but the new stuff, your compassionate capacity hasn't fully developed. So I suppose I'm thinking about climbing is hard, it's arduous. You have to climb before you're really good at climbing. You can't go, like if you're going to run a marathon, you go and you do little runs and you climb and you sort of train. Or you can run on the treadmill before you run on the concrete. But really, you can't really train yourself for climbing without actually climbing, even if you're climbing indoors. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm kind of making sense here, but it's you kind of have to do it, and it's hard, and you might fall off, and it might hurt. And psychotherapy is, I think, very similar. I've got a whole other list of things. I say the other thing for me that pops up is you can't rush it. If I go climbing and I'm full of all the preoccupations and I'm like, right, I've got half an hour, I need to quickly bang out a quick climbing train, I'll fall off really quickly. It's meditative, it's mindful, it's spiritual, it's connected. Therapy's the same. You can't rush it. You see people sitting in therapy going, are we done yet? Can we just go to the end bit, the bit where I'm better? And it's like, no, it's long and slow, and you can't take shortcuts. You create unbreakable bonds with other humans. For me, the co-facilitation and the parallel with lead climbing, where one person holds the rope and one person leads. In a group, I talk a lot in group about the parallels with climbing. If you both try and lead at the same time, it's a train crash. You sit in a group, you're facilitating a group, and you say something, and your co-facilitator says, "Yes, I'm just going to add," and you're like, "I've said it already." Yes. It's the same with climbing. If you both try and lead, no one's holding the rope. I mean, I could go on about this, but I don't know if that gives a kind of a picture. For me, the layers are multiple, but trust, going slow. It's not helpful to do this on your own. Those are for me, the key parallels with climbing.
it's a rich metaphor, really, isn't it, for all
Yeah.
lots of different elements of psychotherapy and compassion focused psychotherapy, but also there's optimism in it too, because with patience, with persistence, with practice, we can experience even very, very difficult or uncomfortable or hard moments with our three emotion regulation systems in balance. There can be a little bit of threat, a little bit of drive, a little bit of soothing, and we're in balance now, which is kind of the, one. I mean, that's gold, isn't it? When we can suddenly notice ourselves facing something, a life situation, a life difficulty, and yet we have those kind of skills and all the rest of it to stay in balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you mentioned I suppose you've talked a little bit about the drama piece as well, but yeah, how is the theatrical background? um, you seem like you're dramatic enough to have been an actor, but is that the right way to say it? But anyway, yeah, how does the theatrical background come in? Maybe even in terms of how you facilitate compassion focused group psychotherapy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I am. Many people, well, you know me well, Stan. Lots of other people know me well. Yes, I'm not immune to a bit of drama. Yes, and also I think being honest about myself. I'm a big show off, and the idea of being a show off is interesting to me because um, it's often has negative connotations. Um, and I certainly remember as a child, it was absolutely, it was to put you in your place. She's just showing off, ignore her. Whereas actually, I've tried to work with my own children as well as in my own life to reclaim the idea that actually being a bit performative, showing off isn't necessarily, it doesn't have to be negative. And I certainly encourage my children to do what others might describe as showing off, um, because and to reward that rather than to negate it. So I suppose that for me is a part of my journey in drama. I started doing, I think, drama when I was really young. I think maybe about 7. Drama classes, did lots of kind of theatre stuff. Absolutely loved it, and I think I then went to university, did a lot more kind of what I would call serious drama. Um, was really interested in dark. There's a man called John Burkoff who has created a lot of really dark rhyming theatre, and we used to do a lot of that kind of stuff. So it would just be dark stage, black clothes, no props, horror, tragedy, all in rhyme, all in rhyming couplets, which I was a huge fan of. So I think that journey from being able to reclaim something about being a show off or something performative and I suppose for me it fits again back into therapy, that idea about how do we teach people that they can switch social mentalities, that you can take on a new role, because people say I can't do compassion. Well, let's play, let's pretend. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the kind of the pretend bit, but it is, let's take on a role. So what would it look like? What would it feel like? What does it make your body do? And in a way that for me then gets right into the way that you would prepare for a role. Makes me think about people like Daniel Day-Lewis and method acting. I think there's a story that when he was, what film was it he was in? Anyway, he was playing somebody who kind of hadn't, was sort of in the medieval times or something. And then the story goes that he didn't wash for 6 weeks or something like that. So, it's pretty hardcore. But that's for me where they begin to overlap. And I think that, I suppose I'm thinking about, it was a while before I realised that these two could be joined together. So I left behind theatre when I left university. As I said before, I realised that I wasn't good enough to actually make it as an actress. And actually, I saw so many people that I loved heartbroken by going ahead and actually being kind of, I guess, spat out in a way that happens a lot. So I sort of left it behind. But then actually, when I began to develop the group programs, I realized that what was missing from the group psychotherapy programs that I'd been involved in was the play and the drama. So I've done training in action methods and psychodrama, and I've been in supervised practice in psychodrama for 9 years. But I see that this is where I could do something that brought everything together, I suppose. The drama, the movement, a lot of the ways that we would warm up before performing is the same way that you would warm up a group. And this comes back to Jacobs Moreno's theatre of spontaneity from way back in the kind of like 40s, that he was he was sort of developing these ideas. But I kind of came quite late to the party and went, oh, the stuff that we used to do to play to get ready to perform, you can use with a group to get them to play, to get ready to do the deep psychological work.
You mentioned the pretending and not being sure about that word. How do you describe that? Because I often notice too that people can sometimes worry that using an acting approach to sort of enact the compassion itself, even if we're not really quite there yet and so on, feels a little bit like pretending. So how would you describe that to someone, as to give them a sense of what we're really doing there with that more acting approach?
I think I'm not comfortable, and I don't use the idea of pretend. What I want to do is, let's go on a journey of discovery to find something, even if it's the smallest kernel, that you can connect with, and then grow that. So I'm thinking about someone I worked with for a long time, who really struggled with her own sense of agency and and holding her own authority, which comes up a lot in all of the work that I do, was that actually people giving themselves permission to say no, or to say I don't like that, or actually that's not okay. Now, if I'd invited her to pretend, then my worry is that then she's doing what she has to do for the whole of the rest of her life, which is pretend to be something she's not, to fit in with perceived societal expectations. So what we did was we went on this journey of discovery to find something in her. But what we did was we discovered this kind of very distant uncle, we'll call him Uncle Jim, who was kick-ass. He was a poacher. So he was a bit of a naughty fella, but this uncle was a poacher. But when she talked about Uncle Jim, she said he took no shit. So I was like, okay, so let's take him. So he became her compassionate other. But then what she did was we took Uncle Jim's character. She took the role of him. So she stepped into that role and became him. So she wasn't pretending to be, she took the role of him. And by being Uncle Jim, what it did was it joined up that character with something that lived in her, and that's why she respected him in the first place. So then after she took the role of him, then it's almost like it left a little residue behind, and then we grew that. So when I do role taking, I will invite people to be this person, be this character, stand like them, speak like them. And then the questions that we ask are to develop that. So, how long have you, so we'll call her Joanne. So Jim, how long have you known Joanne? What's your thinking about her? How do you feel about her? How do you think you can help her? What do you think she needs? So then you're tapping into your patient or your group members' intuitive wisdom, but they don't realize it because they're in the role of the other. And what you get is this fantastic plugging into unconscious, deeply held wisdom. And then when they step out of role, you go, look at that. Now they'll think it's Uncle Jim, but when they're ready, you can nudge them in the right direction, when they can then realize, actually, that was me here. What? I don't know if that. So for me, it's different to pretending.
Yes. No, I'm sort of going back to the title of your book, actually, but an exploratory program. And that's the exploration, I guess, is the sort of the exploring what is in there, the intuitive, intrinsic wisdom of the person. And it's interesting because in some ways we're tapping into the wisdom that Joanne, say, already has, in her own possession.
Yeah.
And also there's a kind of a wisdom that was passed on to her as a sort of a gift from Jim, I guess. But both of these, they're both kind of sources of kind of wisdom that are within her, and bringing that to the surface. It's very different to pretending. It's tapping into something, these pearls that are already in existence down there.
Yeah. And then when you said that, it makes me think of another kind of fascination of mine is with ancestry and storytelling, and how we sense how all of us, wherever we're from, whatever bit of the globe that we're from, we have this shared ancestral history of using stories to make sense of our experience. And some of us are more closely connected to that ancestry than others. So as you know, my husband is Maori, from New Zealand, and is very much more closely and explicitly connected to that tribal history of passing down what in New Zealand we call your whakapapa. So your family story, your genealogy. And people may or may not know that in a lot of Maori people, you'll see the traditional tattoos. That's your whakapapa. They actually tattoo it into, knock it on with a bone and ink into your skin. I am English, and so actually I feel very connected to my ancestral, but maybe not so closely, but my ancestral history of storytelling, and stories like the Canterbury Tales from kind of, times when my ancestors were travelling around England with their carts and their horses, and the better the story, the closer to the fire. I think that's one of the things that's always, I love storytelling. I love stories and storytelling. And I'm thinking about how I try and use that in the groups. So Uncle Jim was Joanne's ancestor. Now people go, he's not his ancestor, he's uncle. It's your ancestor. Because actually Uncle Jim maybe had wisdom passed to him from his, and so it goes back. And so that idea that rather than feeling completely alone in the world, and disconnected and untethered, as many of our patients do, actually we can help to plug people back in. I will often tell the story of Boudica, who was the Briton queen who stood up, was one of the only people to stand up to the Romans. And of course, for women, that has extra layers of resonance. But if you're English and you feel disconnected, let's take the role of Boudica. So just sorry, when you said ancestry, that it kind of that really connected for me.
Yes, we're sort of the current stewards, aren't we, of all of that in a way. All of that is within us, and we can live in the world, kind of knowing that we have that wisdom, if we can just begin to kind of explore and find it. I mean, you're using so much play and creativity, and I think you use sort of props and drawings and storytelling, obviously, and compassionate Pictionary. What is that, by the way? Compassionate Pictionary.
So it's Compassion Focused Pictionary, but yeah. So basically,
sorry.
if you take the game of Pictionary, so the game of Pictionary is where you have a word and you have to draw it without saying it, and your team have to guess. So I got the idea about how hard people found it to engage with the words of compassion. A lot of them are kind of big esoteric words, and many of my patients don't have basic literacy. So actually words like empathy, it's like, I don't know what that means. So I sort of developed this game, which we play often in groups, which was get everybody to write down, or get help to write down, all the different words that mean, that people associate with compassion: empathy, non-judgment, sensitive, acceptance, kindness, care, all of that stuff. Good stuff. Fold them all up, put them in a bowl, and then someone picks out one and they have to draw it. Now, if you've ever tried to draw empathy, it's tricky.
No.
But one of the things that always stays in my mind, someone picked empathy and they were looking at it and just going, and then suddenly had this brainwave, and they drew a cup of tea and an ear.
Oh.
Sounds a bit like cup of tea. empathy, cup of tea.
Okay.
So from that time onwards, empathy and cup of tea became synonymous. And
Right.
that idea that an empathic cup of tea, what would that look like? But what it does is it gets, I suppose for me, it's got a number of different benefits. One is it's play. It gets the group working together, but they don't feel like they're being organized in this sort of organized fun, because people have a lot of really strong reactions to play. And remind me to come back to that, because there's the paradox that I think is really helpful. But so that on one level, you're encouraging people in a very gentle, rudimentary way to begin to play, which is for me absolutely fundamental in terms of reparation of early attachment ruptures. Secondly, you're developing what Yalom calls that group cohesion, that groupness. So you're getting them to cooperate, collaborate. Makes me think of Paul's fantastic paper about competing and withholding versus caring and cooperating. So we're developing and supporting people, encouraging people to cooperate with each other because they're playing a game together. And we're drip feeding in what compassion actually means. Because I provide a sort of an advisory role. So I don't get involved in the game. So if people go, what does that mean? I'll kind of whisper in their ear. So then they're working together. The other layer to this, and I was working with someone recently who's been running a group in a young offenders institute, so for young offenders who it's a prison setting, and they find it really difficult to play because very quickly the whole thing disintegrates and they all want to punch each other. So what we did was we did two versions of the game. We did Compassion Focused Pictionary, where we split them into two teams and got them to compete with each other. Stopped it before they started throwing punches, which was quite quickly, and then got them to play the same game again, but collaborating, and got them to notice the difference. And that's a lovely way in to begin to getting people to notice what the difference is between competing and withholding and a rank system and caring and cooperating. And that's a really helpful game to play when you've got groups that are competing with each other, but they don't know it.
It's a great, it's sort of, it's got so many possibilities really, hasn't it? You know, you've adapted this, everyone kind of knows Pictionary and the basic rules and that you can explain all of that, but then there's so many different ways that you can kind of present it to help people engage with and understand and, you know, sort of take away some of the theory and the ideas or not even maybe the words literally, but just what it feels like, what it means in a felt sense. I mean, cup of tea, empathy. I mean, a lot of empathy has been shown around cups of tea, so it actually, you know, makes complete sense, really. You said there was a paradox with playfulness?
Yeah. So play sits. I think about my house of compassion that I want to build for my group members to coexist within. And play for me is the foundation of that house, but it's not straightforward. I think I've spoken before about one time I laid all the art materials out before the group came in, pile of scarves in one corner, box of crayons, loads of coloured paper. And one woman took one look at the room, went, "Do you think you're doing?" Walked out, slammed the door, kicked it shut behind her. And I was like, oh, she's like that. And what it connected me with is the paradox, is we need safeness in order to play, but we often need play in order to cultivate safeness. So therein lies the paradox. And for those folk who it has never been safe to play, there's never been even a safety or a safeness, then actually you invite people to play and they're, just to be blunt, they're going to tell you to piss off. They're going to feel aggrieved and patronised by the suggestion. One, that because of course it confronts them on a deep unconscious level with the fact that they can't do it. So, and it's often not an awareness. It's not, people don't come into the room, look at the crayons and go, I can't do that. People will come in the room, look at the crayons and go, you patronising beep, beep, beep. So I think there's something about this has to be approached really carefully because it is the foundation for me. But it's the other thing I think is that it has to be cogent with your own style. My natural way of being is playful. You know, in my family, we spend a lot of time pranking each other. Sometimes they go well, sometimes they go badly. I mean, my son passed his driving test a couple of days ago, and of course, he came home from his driving test, knocked on the door. My husband, his dad, opened the door, and the first thing my son said was, "Yeah, I didn't pass. I was like right next to the test centre, and I ran this junction and I failed." And classic conflict. On the one hand, we prank all the time as a family. So actually, Sonny's like, a part of him wants to go, yeah, no, you're not getting me. But what if he has? So,
Yeah.
so he had to go along with it. And I think my son, my boy, lasted about like 2-3 minutes, and then he was like, no, I did it, I passed. But I guess what I'm saying is, that's me. That's woven through me. I love play. I'm a playful person. But if you're not, then, and I do think it's still an important part to the therapeutic process, but you have to then titrate it according to what feels comfortable for you. But it has to be introduced very carefully, I think, because most of the folk that I come across do not find this straightforward at all. And it can really plunge people into a really dark place.
Yes, it sort of becomes a bit threat system activating, I suppose, and there's the fight flight stuff that happens. I remember talking to Paul on a previous episode, and he talked too about another group that sort of perhaps have experienced a lot of neglect and emotional neglect, and that can find preferences very difficult. Like what do you like, or what do you prefer, or do you notice a similar kind of, is there a paradox there as well, where sometimes people might not run from the room, so to speak, but may just really be a little bit possum in the headlights, not sure how to engage with play?
Yeah. Yes. I think this is meant to be playful, because I think sometimes my playfulness does get me into trouble. I got criticised at a public forum recently for saying something that was meant to be light-hearted. But what I was going to say is, choice can be a bit overrated. But I don't, I think that's quite funny, because what I mean is that for some of the folk, certainly a lot of the folk that I work with in groups, they can't do choice. They don't know how to. So if I say, should we do this or this? They're like, I don't know. Or actually, like you said, I love that possum in the headlights. That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
But because there is a freeze response, or actually a shutdown dissociative response, and I'm thinking about that that whole kind of the safeness, and then there's the dissociated shutdown. And actually, unless we're really paying close attention, we might mistake them. Because when people are really disconnected and dissociated, they can look quite compliant. It might look like they're a bit zen, but actually they're completely switched off. So I think what I've discovered over the years is that it's about giving a really clear rationale and a clear instruction for what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then really trying to encourage people to get up and have a go. But I think, as I talked about last time, there has to be an escape pod. I think I did talk about the escape pod when we met last time. So in all of our group rooms, there are extra chairs that people can step out into. And that means that's communicating, I can't, whatever it is that we're about to do, I can't do it. And that's fine. It's better than walking out. So then if people step into the escape pod, then we can check in with them and know that they are not able to engage with whatever we're doing, but then we can just carry on. And sometimes people will continue to engage in whatever it is, an activity or a discussion, but from the escape pod. So they're one step removed from that circle. Or sometimes people, if they can't play the game, they'll have an object. They might have a beanbag to represent them, and they'll put themselves in the circle if we're playing a game or engaging in something, but they can't quite bear to be in. So I think it's about giving people other options, but also not expecting that your group members will be able to make choices about what they do or don't want to do, or what they, like you say, what their preferences are. That doesn't mean we take people's choices away, but you might need to give people one instruction rather than, would you like to do this or this? I don't know.
some scaffolding and some helpful guidance while staying evocative and discovering and exploring at the very same time. I mean, there's just so much classical conditioning that's gone on in people's background, isn't there? And so there's sort of real-time desensitizing that also has to kind of be part of this playfulness, safeness dance that you're working on there.
And also accepting, I think, as group psychotherapists, accepting that in the early stages and at different points, people will slide, they won't be able to stay in that place of safeness. Something will happen. So our group programs are rolling, which means that people come and go, not constantly, but next week, two groups the folk from the preparation group will join the exploratory group. Everybody's bricking it. I can't think of a better way to describe it. You know, and they're like, yeah, we don't want them. And the ones that are coming are like, we don't want to go. So that means that next Tuesday at 12:30, there will be very little safeness in the room. So I'm going to have to really hold that, because actually they will have gone, most of them at best will have slid back into safety seeking. So they'll all be in threat. So it's that movement. It's helping people to develop that capacity for safeness. But once they've got it, it isn't constant. It's tolerating the fact that they will shift out. And actually, sometimes the shift out of that place of safeness and into the safety seeking, back into the red, is might be prompted by you. Might be the ending, might be a piece of exploratory work. It might be something that somebody else says. It's not about avoiding it. It's about how we then manage it and how do we prepare people using that cultivation and of the compassionate capacity to hold with, I want to go right now, or I want to pull a door off its hinges, or I want to be able to put something to it.
I mean, you've dedicated your professional life, really to trying to be helpful for people who are at the edge of the therapeutic opportunity, as you said earlier. And what really draws you to working with people who've sort of been told that they're too difficult or untreatable? And you sort of hear that too, which is, sort of disconcerting to think that, kind of therapists and clinicians of various stripes might say that sort of thing. But you've just been so drawn to that. What's that, do you think?
Oh, I think there's lots of layers to it. I think first and foremost, there's a belligerent part of me that is, don't tell me these people can't be helped. And sometimes that gets me into trouble, because sometimes that stops being in the service of my group and becomes in the service of me. Don't tell me what I can and can't do. If I want to do it, I'll bloody well do it. And I've made really big mistakes on the back with that part of me running the show, where I've put people in group who are dangerous. I have put people in group who are not ready for therapy. So I'm very aware of, as time goes on, I become increasingly aware of when that part of me is activated, and needs a bit of, it's all right. It's all right. No. So that part of me needs a firm boundary and a firm no. So there is that. I think the other bit that I think I probably mentioned before is that there was another version of me who would have been one of those personality disordered patients where I guess if that belligerent part of me had not been heard or received in the way that it was by really important people in my life, then that belligerent part of me could have taken over and run the show. And I could have been in the patient's chair and not the therapist's chair, without a shadow of a doubt. And I know that about I know that about myself. I didn't then, but I do now. So I suppose there's multiple layers to it, but I suppose there's two important parts. Is that I know when I meet with people who've had those kind of early life experiences, there is a part of me that I get it, not on the same level, but I do have lived experience that I bring to the work, and I don't bring that explicitly, but I know it and I feel it. And I have to be very mindful of it, which is where I suppose I come to my own personal therapy, so that I don't get over-identified and act something out which is unhelpful. But I know that sometimes I listen to things that people say, and I think, yeah, I get that. I mean, I get it here, but I also get it here. And that, I think, makes me, I'm not a paragon of virtue, you know. I'm not Saint Catherine just out there wanting to kind of save the poor wretches. That's not where I'm coming from, because I think that, yeah, it could have been me. And maybe also, I suppose, I'm bringing compassion to the part of myself that wasn't given compassion. I'm giving something that I didn't have. But yeah, but I think it's complicated. But I do know that it's not. I don't see myself as having, you know, yeah, I don't see myself as a paragon of virtue. I think I have moments where I'm like, only I can do this work, and I'm like, oh, Kate, shut the fuck up. It's all wrapped in with the belligerent.
Yeah. No, it does. You seem to be someone who is really ready and willing to roll the sleeves up and do hard, work hard to achieve something, even if someone else says that, it can't be done. And in fact, this is channeled into this area because you do both cognitively, but sort of affectively, you resonate with those
Yeah.
people to in your own way, not exactly the same, but you sort of, there's that sense, you feel it too, and so your kind of belligerence has been channeled into real advocacy and also compassion directed to a group that so often misses out,
Yeah,
I suppose.
mostly.
Mostly.
Mostly channeled. Sometimes she's jumping up and down, getting me into a whole heap of flipping trouble.
Well, one thing that got you into trouble was agreeing to write a whole book, probably, Kate. But like, you did it.
But you know what, though? Funny about that was that actually, honestly, hand on heart. A lot of people might not believe this, but I'm absolutely honestly hand on heart. I loved every minute of writing that book. And a big part of it was the publisher, because they let me just write the book I wanted to write. They didn't tell me how to do it or what to do, or they just let me write it. And what is in that book is basically the first draft. I just sat and wrote it, and I loved every minute of it. I had incredible proofreaders. Tobin Bell read chunks of it. My really good friend, Lucy Courtney Brisbane, who's also a novelist, she read the whole thing. Neil Clapton, my fella, all the, it obviously it was copy edited and all of that, but actually I loved it. Because it was one great big story. It's a storybook. I tried to make a storybook as much of a textbook as I could, but fundamentally at its core, it's a storybook. It's the story, it's the unspoken stories of all of these incredible humans, and they're all anonymized and caricatured, but everything that's in that book happened. So it wasn't like, I get bogged down with all the theory. I'd have to do it because actually it's in my memory because I remember it. So this for me was a testimony to all these incredible humans that put themselves through this really painful process. And me too, because I messed up lots and found myself out there, on a limb thinking, I have no idea to wind this back. We've got 5 minutes left. She's in floods of tears. He's stormed out and I've got scarves everywhere. Oops.
It's good to know that writing such a book can be an enjoyable process. So and it makes me feel a little bit silly with my next question. I might end up sounding a bit reductionistic now, but there are the 5-phase model, I think, that sort of structures the book a little bit from assessment to moving on. Could you give us a little bit of a sense of the 5 phases and perhaps, how the group too becomes a big part of the agent of change?
Yeah. No, it doesn't sound reductionist at all because it was first and foremost a textbook.
Right.
So
Yes.
that was the publishers came to me and said, "Will you write this?" And I said, "Yes." So I the storytelling came with, I thought, actually, I've read so many textbooks over the years that had information I needed, but my slightly kind of, my low attention span meant that I couldn't read them properly. So I was like, well, how about if if I got characters that people could relate to, then anyway. So so I suppose, because I think you were saying about something before about in the email about what's unique about them, and I guess in some ways, some of it's unique, some of it's not. Because I think phase 1, assessment and formulation, I'm constantly surprised about how little attention is paid to how fundamentally important the first contact is. So I'm kind of in that phase 1, I'm inviting people to, walk around your waiting room, go and have a look at what your building looks like from the outside. Is it inviting? Read the letters that you send to people. Would you come to an appointment to talk to someone about your mental health problems if this was the letter that you received? If not, change it. How do you reach out to people? Do you remind them that their appointment's coming? Do you ask them if they need anything to access the building? This kind of what I would call dynamic administration doesn't get talked about anywhere near as much. It does in group analysis. I just think it doesn't get talked about anywhere near as much as it should. And we lose so many people before they even get through the doors. So that assessment and formulation phase I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Again, I'm fortunate enough to be able to see people multiple times. So it's that kind of having time to spend with people, thinking about what they need. Where do you want me to sit? Am I okay here? Would it be better, what? So really slowing that down to check out with people, not expecting people to tell you their whole story the first time in a coherent and organized fashion. As I said, I've had my own experiences of group as well as individual therapy, and the ones I remember and the ones, the really helpful ones, where I wasn't sat down and told to tell my story from start to finish with all the gruesome details, and what I made of it in a coherent fashion, because I couldn't. So I suppose it's about really stepping into the shoes of what it might be like for our patients and getting that process set up so it's more attuned. And I wouldn't expect people, I wouldn't necessarily be giving a full formulation to people. You'll have a working formulation, but you need to work out whether or not the person that you're sitting in front of you can tolerate it. So I always write to my patients and not about them, never more than 2 sides. So there's something for me about that bit. The phase 1 is practical, actually. It's quite practical, but we need to be attuned and thoughtful about what the person can tolerate. And don't write people off if they're a bit discombobulated. I love that word. I don't think it gets used enough. Because a lot of people, I'm often discombobulated. I woke up this morning and was like, oh my God, I didn't read that email. Flip. I was a bit discombobulated. I was like, shit, I didn't plan properly. But anyway, I was out last night with my daughter instead of prepping. but so that's phase 1. Does that kind of...
That's beautiful. Yeah, really that engagement piece, isn't it, too? It's engagement in the deeper sense of how do we really help people to feel heard and understood and to feel safe and to really prepare things in that sense.
And then phase 2 follows along from that. So once they're in, we've met with them, we've worked out together what would be most helpful. Then, of course, what happens in a lot of services is that then they fall into a chasm of nothingness for often years while they wait for therapy. So we have a waiting list group. And the waiting list group runs once a month for an hour. It doesn't matter if you don't come, you won't lose your place on the waiting list. It's a try before you buy. Can you find the building? Can you work out the route? Birmingham, I work in Birmingham, it's massive. Some people travel for more than 2 hours to get to the group on multiple buses and trains. And so I want people to have that experience before they come for the first session. They can ask questions about how it works. We have tea and biscuits. It's low key. We don't breathe. We don't get into the therapy material, although of course it emerges. And the thing that I'm most proud of in this whole program is that we have a lived experience practitioner who runs that group alongside me. And actually she kind of she has a secret look that she gives me that says, you're moving, you've got your therapy hands, because I've got therapy hands on to kind of get in and start talking to people about their stuff. And I'm not allowed to. So she'll give me a look that says therapy hands, put them away. So I have to zip it and pour the tea. So I pour the tea, and while the people that come ask Sarah about what the program's really like, and she'll say, do you know what, I'm not going to lie, it's fucking terrifying on your first day. And actually, interestingly, that often is the reason why people do then turn up, because they've had an honest, authentic response. As I said, I sit and pour the tea and try to blend into the wallpaper, keep my mouth shut as much as possible. That is such a gift. And if you want to buy the book, the last kind of 3 or 4 pages of the book is Sarah. So the end of the book is Sarah's words, and she's been involved in every step of this book with me. But the last word is hers, and it's a beautiful summary of her journey. I've not been able to read it yet without crying. I've not been able to get all the way through it yet. It's just such a moving story of her journey, narrative of her journey. But anyway, that's phase 2.
Yep.
You don't have to come. You won't lose your place. Have a cup of tea, have a biscuit, sit in the therapy room. This is where the therapy takes place. That's the waiting room you'll sit in. I'm going to do some evaluation on it over the next year or so. I don't know whether it helps with attrition, but all I do know is that since we implemented the waiting list group, our attrition levels have gone way down. Now, you're a scientist, you're a researcher, and you know that. I'm sure you wouldn't allow me to say, ergo, it works, but we're going to evaluate it and have a look. But anecdotally, whether people come or not, they're held in mind. Sometimes nobody comes. Sometimes a few people come. People sometimes come once. But the point is that they know that they're held, and that they can come and talk to somebody who really gets it. So that's phase 2. Phase 3, this is when the program starts. So the program is made up of 2 component parts, but it's one therapy. So you do 12 weeks of preparation and engagement, slow paced, low expectations. We introduce nanospecs of theory. As you know, Stan, my views on, the psychoeducation has to be subservient to what's happening in the room to process. If people come in a hugely distressed state, then our job is to attend to that and then weave the psychoeducation into what material people bring and not the other way around. So I don't do agendas with a flip chart and we're going to do this, this and this today, because you set yourself up. Because what if you don't cover it? You'll get some person who will go, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. So don't do that. Essentially, I'm focused on getting the group to talk to each other. We breathe, we feedback, we check in. Everybody speaks. We pass it around the circle. Back to the storytelling days. You've got everybody passes it. Another version of Lord of the Flies, that book where the children go rogue and kill each other. We don't do that, but we do have something like a conch. So we pass it around. So you don't hold anything, but you get past the check-in. And when you've got the check-in, that's your time to speak. People can ask you questions or relate to you, but they can't take it off you until you're ready to pass it. And obviously, if people go on too long, I'll have to give them a nudge. So, and then the psychoeducation is wrapped around what people bring in their check-in. So the chat and the check-in is really important, but it's slow pace, 12 weeks, everything rolls. So you start at different entry points, but everybody does 12 weeks. And then week 13, they move to the 12-month exploratory group.
Right.
And that's phase 4.
Phase 4, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's an imprecise science because these days, our dropout rates were only ever 20%, but I would say they've probably dropped to about 10 now.
Wow.
There's a lot, we're beginning to look at why that is, but I suspect there's something about the rolling program's really established now. People meet Sarah at the very beginning. A sense in which this is established. I'm not going to say for a second that we know what we're doing, but we know more what we're doing than we did, because I started the evaluation of the program the day the program started. So we learned on the job. So that initial evaluation that I've just published last year, that was based on the learning. So now what we're seeing is that actually our attrition rates are low and our attendance rates are really high. And if people come because the others come, in the same way that people won't come because the others aren't coming. So it works in a cycle. So then the exploratory group is the same format, but we use the compassionate mind training and psychoed to then inform the work in action. So people go back and rework early trauma memories. You know, there's controversial, it can be a bit controversial because some people say you can't do that in group. I would say, come and have a look. You can. The group members will step in and act as auxiliaries. We've had group members stepping into someone's trauma scene as a police officer to stop the abuse. We've had people taking the role of Gandalf, someone's compassionate other, to again block a door, magic wand somebody. I mean, this is where the creativity and the psychodrama comes to life. We use objects to represent people and places. People read letters, empty chair work. Tobin and I have been talking a lot about, I think he's writing his chair work book at the moment. I think. Sorry if I wasn't supposed to say that, but I think it's coming. It's going to be really exciting. But Tobin and I have talked about how you do chair work individually and in group differently. But the great thing about having a group is that you've got people who can come in, they can play out the whole scene. You can bring the person out into mirror so they can see it. So this is deep exploratory work. Sometimes people just sit and talk. Sometimes we play. Sometimes we go back and go revisit the early kind of psychoed and compassionate mind training. Sometimes we create images of our calm places. Sometimes we go outside and find something from the outside space that connects us to our compassion. People write letters, they put people in the chair, they bury stuff, they unearth stuff, they put hats on, they take them off. I'm trying to do it in a shorthand way, but that's the exploratory work. And then we finish. And if you get all the way through the program, because no breaks, no eating, no drinking, psychotherapy. People get really pissed off. Why can't we have a cup of tea? Because then it wouldn't be psychotherapy. I think once.
So how long is the session then?
2 hours.
Right.
2 hours, no break, no tea. But if you get all the way to the end, the last group, you can have tea, coffee, whatever, herbal tea. I will make tea and I bake cakes. So I've been doing this for 11 years the program's been running without a break. I love baking. That's my kind of something I share with the beautiful Marcella Matos. We talk about recipes and stuff quite a lot. I love baking. So if you finish the group, on your last group, you get to choose whatever you like. I've made 7-tier gluten-free rainbow cakes, lemon meringue pies. I did a Victoria sponge on Tuesday. We did a dairy-free frittata, which I have to say got Sunny to make because I couldn't. But anyway, so the idea is this is a celebration of the ending, but also, of course, the symbolism isn't lost on people. This is the birthday parties that these people never had as children. These are the birthday cakes that were never made for them. And people often say that, and it makes me cry.
Yes.
Because to not ever have had a birthday cake that's something. So yeah.
You set a high bar if I need to be baking brownies and things like that.
The replications of this group. So we now have four CFGP babies running in different parts of the UK, and they don't bake cakes. So that's what I mean, is that first and foremost, it has to be cogent to you. So they don't bake cakes; they do different stuff.
Great.
But, and then the ending is we have postcards. These things. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Little postcards. Everyone who's leaving gets a postcard from everyone who's staying, and the person who's leaving leaves a postcard in the book. And we've got a leavers book that's this massive, great big brown scrapbook that's 11. It's got 11 years of wisdom in it, and it sits in the middle of the group therapy.
That's a treasure
on the table, and it's full of treasure and messages of hope and advice and thoughts and song lyrics and poems.
Great stuff. Great stuff. This.
And then phase 5, very quick. Sorry, go on.
Oh,
where I'm just thinking about time. Phase 5, moving on group, same as the waiting list group. Sarah runs this group. I've been actually kicked out of this group recently because I can't sit on my therapy hands, so I don't run the group anymore. I've been kicked out because I don't help, basically. Because what you get an hour a month for a year. You don't have to come. We will keep people open for a year after they've completed therapy. Cup of tea, biscuit. Sarah runs the group and helps people with that really tough process of individuation, because we've created the safe haven, the secure base. People seek proximity to us, but that final phase of individuation is a tough one. So that's Sarah's job. And at the moment, she's running it with my co-therapist. In the longer term, it will be two people with lived experience will run that group together, and we will stay out of it.
Mm-hmm. So all up, it might be a couple of years really that people are able to be in this process, with
Half,
you and
3.
together. Sorry?
Yeah. 2.5, 3. Yeah.
Two
For a
and a
lot
half,
of people.
3 years. Yes. Yeah. 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 No, it's amazing stuff. I appreciate you just sort of going through that. I know you had to sort of summarize it very much, but I think it gives us a real taste actually of what the group experience might just a little bit be like, and I'm sure people will be hungry for more, and with any luck purchasing your book. You, when, when you hold it up, you need to speak because otherwise Zoom doesn't know you're needing to be on the screen.
Oh, sorry. Here is my book. And just to say, the cover, this image was taken from a photograph that I took of the therapy room. So one of the exercises that we do is we give everybody a ball of wool and get them to wrap the wool around the chairs of the other group members. And then we give people little post-it notes and pegs so they can say what the connections are. And this image is taken from a photograph. So that was what I wanted on the front cover, because this group is all about connections, the group members making connections with each other.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
You even got to choose the cover. I mean, that's
Pavilion
wonderful.
Publishing.
Yeah, there you go.
They were
Well,
amazing.
so what's next for Kate Lucre?
Okay, so I am I've been doing this kind of work for, I don't know what, 20 something years, and I've never had a website. Or any kind of marketing or anything like that. So one of my really good friends is an event manager, and she now works alongside me, and spends a lot of time telling me off. But so I'm going to launch a website. We have a retreat booked in September 2026, just outside Birmingham, in a beautiful, in the middle of the English countryside, 10th to the 13th of September. I'm going to be taking this work into a personal practice retreat. So psychodrama, group based. We're going to have a fire pit. There'll be storytelling. There'll be yoga. So that's, I guess, sort of part of what I'm wanting to develop. I want to be invited to Australia.
Yes.
So I'm hoping to go and get and do some training overseas, talking to people about hopefully
Yes.
maybe going to go to the States, to
Canada,
America,
I think.
Canada, America, maybe Australia, maybe New Zealand. If anyone wants to invite me, I'd love to come. Looking at maybe putting together some introductory training, some intermediate training, and then personal and advanced training, and then personal practice retreats as a package. So if anyone's out there and they fancy it, then let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one more book, another book that I'm thinking about is, I'm not going to go into massive details about this, but there is an untold story about Fuchs and Bion. So Fuchs, who developed group analysis, Bion, who went on to develop the Tavistock Clinic in London, in England. They both worked together in Birmingham during the Second World War with the Northfield experiments, working with military veterans, but they never talked about each other. So I want to write a semi-factual, semi-fictional story of why they didn't. Everyone's got theories, but I wanted to create a fictional explanation. So you get the story of Fuchs's life, the story of Bion's life, the development of group analysis, but in a fictional story where the gaps, the stuff that we don't know, I've got an idea about a fictional kind of drama of why they ended up never speaking about each other, even though their work was very similar.
Love it. That's so interesting. It's really, we'll have to have you back on the show when you have done that
Okay.
project as well. But Okay, well, look, yeah. I mean, it's impressive stuff, and your energy is infectious, and the wisdom that's just woven through, even though you're, quite delightful and kind of. Even just sort of humorous in the way you describe it, the wisdom cuts through what you're saying. I mean, it's just and hard learned, just through years of working with people and with their suffering. So it's incredible stuff. The book is highly recommended. And so, Kate Lucre, thank you for speaking with me on Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you, Stan.